If you don't know where we're at, you haven't read the whiteboard. We are in lesson number 4.
Looks like an exciting one.
And we're going to talk about Lady Wisdom. So, we have a tendency, even in the English language, to personify things. So, for instance, you might have a car that you've had for quite a while, and you might say, well, she is a good old car. And some people even have a name for their car. I don't know if you remember Spencer and Edna Smith, but their favorite old Chevy, they had a name for this car. It was and for some reason, I don't know why, many times it's a female name that is given to ships and
But it is,
like that.
for whatever reason.
For whatever reason. And so personifications are not unusual to us.
31.
And so when we say that a car or something else is a she, we don't really mean that it's a person, but it's a way of personifying what this vehicle does for us. So when it comes to wisdom now, Solomon is going to use this technique of personification, and he is going to talk about wisdom, and he's also going to talk about her adversary, which is folly, and her partner, which is prudence. So we have names, and again, it's as if wisdom becomes a person and is actually acting out like a person would act out. But this is just a way of describing the way something works. Okay. So us men, we should not be jealous. These are not male names, they're all women, female names.
Maybe God's trying to tell us something.
Ah. Well, you know, it really gets me because there are a number of people who believe that the Bible is anti-woman. And I don't see how you can say that the Bible is anti-woman by any way, shape, or form.
Well, it's not. I don't think so.
It's clearly not.
Anyway, before we begin our lesson, though, I want to look up a verse out of the book of Proverbs. Okay? So if you have your Bibles, turn to Proverbs chapter 21, verse 15. Now, some versions this comes out better than others. But this was shared online this weekend. And given the most current set of events that are taking place in our nation right now, this verse is unbelievable.
Oh man, doesn't it nail it?
Would you read Proverbs 21:15, Dan?
When justice is done, it is joy to the righteous, but terror to the evildoers.
Now,
Doesn't that nail it?
Doesn't it? Nail it?
Wow. That is
Seriously.
awesome.
Seriously, somebody had this online, and when I read that, I could not believe that. But again, so there's, as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. What we're seeing now may be repackaged, maybe a little bit different, but there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, so if you have your study guide now, we are in lesson number 4, and we're going to take a look at chapters 8 and 9. And so would somebody be willing to read verses 1 through 11 of chapter 8?
Doesn't wisdom call out? Doesn't understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way, she takes her place where the paths meet. Besides the gates leading into the city, she cries out at the entrance. She says, "People, I call out to you. I raise my voice to all human beings. You who are childish, get some good sense. You who are foolish, set your hearts on getting it. Listen, I have things to say to you and can depend on. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true. My lips hate evil. All the words of my mouth are honest. None of them is twisted or sinful. To those who have understanding, all my words are right. To those who found knowledge, they are true. Choose my teaching instead of silver. Choose knowledge rather than fine gold. Wisdom is worth more than rubies. Nothing you want can compare with her.
What version do you have?
Very good, very good.
Wow.
What version is that one?
This is an NIV. I used this for years, and then I was on the other one, Pastor Haddon. I thought, well, I'll go back to the one I was used to.
Aha, very good. All right, so,
That'd be the funny translation.
we've always personified things. So Solomon's personifying wisdom. So instead of it becoming an it becomes a she. And as a living being, then wisdom ends up with a capital W, because it's like a name. So as a person, wisdom was able to rebuke the foolish, praise the wise, and display a wide range of emotions. She stood by God at the creation of the universe and resists her personified nemesis, who is called what?
Folly.
Folly. Folly, exactly. So as a living being, she was able to go to those who needed her and teach them with timely message, with righteousness and prudence. And later on, we're going to talk about prudence as being her friend, or her cohort. All right. So it says Solomon portrayed wisdom as a fiery, determined priest who represented everything that was good about God. And what you see here is that she goes just about everywhere where there's people. Okay? If there's people there, she's there. And she's trying to proclaim her wisdom. And it says, no one who is beyond the hearing of her voice. Wisdom was no respecter of persons. She showed no partiality toward any race or social class. Again, I realize we live in the society today where race and social standings is being made way, way, way too much. We live in this woke society. Well, again, God's word is for everybody. God's wisdom is for everybody. So it doesn't matter if you are from the richest family in the country, the poorest family. You know, I think of a guy, when we talk about things like that, Dr. Ben Carson. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he was our Secretary of Health. and
Oh, did you
Human
know
Services.
that for the Pendleton
Yes.
fundraiser banquet this fall, he's going to be the speaker?
Ah.
And my
okay.
daughter has a
That's
table, and
right.
I've already got a ticket.
Wow. Well, very good. Very good. You know, he became a world-renowned pediatric brain surgeon. He's famous for even operating on conjoined twins. Brilliant man. But he was raised in the ghettos, I think, of Detroit. His mother was a single mother, and he very easily could have fallen into the trap of a ghetto life.
And started to.
But she wouldn't let him. And anyway, so wisdom was available to him, and he followed the path of wisdom, and his life obviously has been changed. So you think about things like that. So wisdom's passion was to train and correct the immature, the inexperienced, and the naive. And again, there is the warning having to do with the natural consequences of actions. We need to realize there's spiritual laws, there's also physical laws in the universe. So if you go to New York City, and you go to the Empire State Building, and you go to the 88th floor with the open deck, and you decide you're going to step off because you don't believe in the law of gravity anymore, okay? Doesn't apply to you. Well, see what happens very, very, very quickly, okay? And so the same is true in life. There's spiritual principles, spiritual laws that apply in our lives, and there's natural consequences one way or the other. So, unlike her adversary Folly, who attempted to mislead young people with deceptive words and half-truths, wisdom relied on clarity and honesty. And again, I need to be careful. It's not like I'm opposed to public schools, but I'm very concerned right now with what is going on and the agendas that are being
It's not good.
forced on these teachers to present to children at younger and younger and younger ages. And I think a lot of it simply is folly at work.
Absolutely, it is.
And so, anyway. So, interestingly enough, as you get to the end of that section, here is something that is absolutely beautiful. It says in verses 10 and 11, receive my instruction and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. That is totally contrary to American culture. Think about it. It's almost as if we are taught the one who dies with the most toys wins. You know, we never have enough. We always want more. So people are taking second jobs and third jobs, and they're trading up. They may have a perfectly good house, but they want a better house. And you know, it's always more things. Okay. And so what Solomon is trying to say, who was perhaps the richest king of all of Israel, that's not what's important. Okay. You know, if you have things, that's fine. If you have riches, that's fine. It's not condemning them. What it's saying is there are things that are more important. So, again, that goes totally contrary to our American culture and our thinking. All right, so let's take a look at wisdom's rewards in verses 12 through 21, please.
I wisdom dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way and the perverse mouth I hate. Counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding. I have strength. By me kings reign and princes decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me early will find me. Riches and honors are with me, yes, enduring riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. I lead in the way of righteousness, in the midst of the paths of justice, that I may cause those who love me to inherit wealth, and I will fill their treasuries.
So, I, wisdom, personified, dwell with who? What is wisdom's French
Prudence.
name? Prudence. And by the way, that's an old-fashioned name. You know, people used to name their daughters Charity or Prudence or whatever, and I thought they were beautiful names. But anyway, your study guide points out that Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, that wonderful source of theological wisdom, defines prudence as the ability to govern and discipline oneself with the use of reason and skill and good judgment in the use of resources. So, wisdom and prudence are treated as equals. Now, what's interesting is that in Hebrew, the word can be used either way. It is used to describe a wicked person's clever ways. In these passages, the term is usually translated craftiness or shrewdness. For instance, like the snake in the Garden of Eden. And who is the snake?
Satan.
Satan. So the word can be used different ways. Again, I heard an excellent teaching by Andy Woods on context. And just because a word in the Bible is translated in one verse and means something in one verse does not mean that that same word always should be translated or interpreted as that in every verse of the Bible. You have to look at the context of what is being talked about. And so anyway, in the context here, this is something good. Prudence is something good, something that helps in our understanding. And over on page 34 of your study guide at the top, it reminds us of Solomon and Adonijah. Remember, Adonijah was scheming against him. And God gave Solomon wisdom, he gave him prudence, he gave him understanding to realize what the situation really was. And so he dealt accordingly. So wisdom passionately hates the ways evil manifests itself through human beings, namely through pride, evil actions, and unwholesome speech. So, again, then it's interesting that it gets into the situation of being a counselor to kings. And back on page 33 of your study guide, there is a box there entitled The Wisdom of Unbelieving Kings. Would somebody read that for us?
Solomon taught that God is the source of all wisdom, and that wisdom was the source of all power and authority, especially for kings. In many kingdoms in the ancient Middle East, kingship was believed to have been established by their pagan gods. The king was viewed as representing and often embodying the authority of the local deity. Therefore, the local inhabitants believed that a king ruled by divine right. That is why Hammurabi, king of ancient Babylon, felt free to boast that he was the son of Babylon. He ruled as representatives of the local god Marduk. Kings were also believed to have direct access to divine wisdom. Therefore, Hammurabi claimed that he had plumbed the depth of wisdom. That belief gave Hammurabi the authority he needed to develop his famous set of laws called the Hammurabi Code.
Right, and believe it or not, for those who have studied those, there are a lot of good things that are in the Hammurabi Code. So what we need to realize is when we go over to the book of Romans, we're all created in the image of God. And we do have a God consciousness. Yes.
Can you explain to me what the Hammurabi Code is?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. So anyway, because of that, we have some natural understanding, natural revelation. And I think that's what Paul is contrasting in Romans 1 and 2, is actual explicit divine revelation and natural revelation. And he's saying that even by natural revelation, people should know that there's a God and they're responsible to him. Anyway, Hammurabi was an ancient ruler, and he put together a set of rules that are similar to the Ten Commandments, similar to the laws of Moses, and he had them etched in stone. And when they were excavating ancient Babylon, I believe it was, they came up with this big stone, and in it are these rules that are etched in it. And since he was the one who was behind it, they call it the Hammurabi Code. And it's ancient laws, and many of them were actually good laws.
Yeah.
And again, we have to realize that mankind has this God consciousness.
I think the only difference is that the Ten Commandments are God-inspired by the Holy Spirit, whereas Hammurabi's were not.
Right.
But much of what he said is right on.
Right, and how much got handed down. For instance, almost every culture in the world has a flood story. Okay, now it may not be the exact story that we have in the Bible of Noah's flood, but yet they reference some sort of a catastrophe that hurt planet Earth and things like that.
I believe they found at least 120.
So, yeah. So what I'm saying is that even in human culture, there is a degree of wisdom. And Solomon is giving God the credit for that. That this didn't come just from...
Hammurabi took the credit.
Oh, of course he did. Of course he did. Right. The Egyptian pharaohs, they considered themselves gods. I mean, even up into the 20th century, you have the Japanese emperors who were worshipped. You know? And so, hopefully, we've gotten past that, but it's hard to say. So, anyway, there is such thing as actual wisdom. And I believe that many of our founding fathers, not all of them were believers. Some of them were Bible-believing Christians. And the series that we showed on Sunday night shows how many of them were influenced by Bible preaching and teaching and things. But I do believe that a lot of our founding documents were literally wise documents have helped us throughout these years. So. All right, so again, there is a benefit for following wisdom. Let's take a look a little bit about wisdom in creation in chapter 8, verses 22 through 31. Would somebody read that?
The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up, at the beginning, at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there was no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs, abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth. Before he had made earth and its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the foundations of the deep. When he assigned the sea to its limit, so that its waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman. I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man.
Very good, thank you. So I've listened to a number of Christian teachers, what we would call apologists lately, and many of them have debated with atheists, or even spoken to groups of atheists. And apparently there's one thing that atheists cannot get around. And some atheists have said, if I ever were to become a theist and believe in God, this would probably be the one thing. And that is called the fine-tuning of the universe. We live in a perfectly balanced universe. Planet Earth is absolutely perfect for life. And yet you go to other planets and you die. Yeah, okay.
I want to know what an atheist is, because there's somebody in my family there's some people in my family that are atheists, and they say they don't believe in God.
Right.
So.
Sure. Basically, there are three categories of people when it comes to believing in God. An atheist says there is no God. It comes from two Greek words. A means no. Theos is God. So an atheist says there is no God at all. In between that is what you would call an agnostic. An agnostic says, well, I don't know whether there's a God or not. I'm really not sure whether there's a God. A theist is someone who says, yes, I believe in God. So there's a gentleman who came and spoke when I was in high school at our church, and he used to speak at college campuses. And some of these students would say, well, I don't believe your word you're saying because I'm an atheist. And he'd say, well, that's interesting. Let me ask you this question. Of all of the universe, how much of everything that there's possible to know do you know? Like how many grains of sand are on the seashore, how many stars are there in heaven, all these different things. Well, most of them would have to admit that they knew less than 1% of everything there was to know. But anyway, Jade Benor would say, well, look, you're a very intelligent young person. I'm going to give you credit. I'm going to give you 2%. I'm going to say that you know 2% of everything that there is to know in all of the universe. Now, you say you're an atheist. Okay? You say an atheist says there is no God. You know there's no God. Is it possible, just possible, that God could exist in the 98% of the universe that you know nothing about? Well, if they were a thinking student, they would say, well, yeah, that's possible. You'd say, congratulations. You're no longer an atheist. Now you're an agnostic, because you're admitting you don't know whether there's a God or not.
I never used to believe in God. I wasn't an atheist or anything, but I just didn't know if there really was one or not.
So that's an agnostic, who
An
says they don't
agnostic.
know whether there's a God. So anyway, I don't know what I was saying.
But I see him in my dreams and stuff.
You were,
Uh,
I don't remember either.
I don't remember where we
Sorry, I'm asking
Oh,
too many
that's okay.
questions.
Oh, okay. It has to do with creation.
Yeah.
And anyway, these the one thing that many of these atheists cannot get around is the perfect balance in the universe, absolutely perfect, and the fact that we live in a planet that is absolutely designed for life, and a lot of them cannot get around the fact that there is design, and a lot of them cannot get around the fact that there are laws of the universe. So if there are laws in the universe, where do these laws come from? And so it's a big sticking point to them. So as Solomon is developing this, he's saying that one of the very first things that God brought into existence was wisdom, and that God used wisdom in His creation. And so we can see that again in this balance, this perfect harmony that we see in the universe, in our own bodies. The more that scientists get into what is called microbiology, the more they are throwing out Darwinism, because they're finding that the human body, let alone other bodies, like animal bodies, are extremely complex, extremely significant. And then Mark Garrett and I were watching some videos this week having to do with what is it called? It'll come to me in just a moment. It has to do with science and all these different dimensions. And anyway, what they're finding out is that quantum physics, that's what I'm trying to say. In quantum physics, they're finding out that particles change. And they change if they're observed. If they're not observed, they're one thing, but if they are observed, they become something different. And it goes way beyond my pay grade and my understanding. But these scientists who are Christians, who are studying quantum physics, are saying that they believe this is evidence of God. That God, by His very presence, makes everything visible, that is visible, and holds things together. And again, like I say, I can't even begin to try to describe it to you. But anyway, they're saying, now even in the study of quantum physics, a lot of these questions, these scientists can't answer. But these scientists who are Christians are saying, well, here it says right here in Scripture, God was there. So anyway, wisdom is personified as being there and being part of creation. However, some people have taken these verses out of context, and so on page 35 of your study guide, there's a heresy that developed in the early church based on these verses right here in Proverbs 8. Would somebody read a heretical use of wisdom?
Because of the references to wisdom being the firstborn of creation, and the craftsman at God's side during creation, some Bible scholars believe that Proverbs 8 is a description of the Christ prior to the incarnation, even though wisdom is personified here as a woman. In Christian history, the heretical movement called Arianism picked up on this idea and attempted to use passages such as Proverbs 8:22-31 to prove that Jesus was a created being. They claimed that Jesus could not be co-eternal with the Father if, in fact, He was a created being as described in Proverbs 8. Even in wisdom, as described in Proverbs 8, even if wisdom, as described in Proverbs 8, is a representation of Christ, one need not conclude that either wisdom or Christ had a beginning. For example, Colossians 1:15 describes Christ as the firstborn of all creation. This does not mean that Jesus was the first created entity, but rather that He holds preeminence over all creation.
So Arianism has been resurrected within the last 100 years and is packaged as a very, very famous cult that comes knocking at your door called Jehovah's Jehovah's Witnesses, exactly.
Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Seventh-day
Right.
Adventists.
Well, okay, there's all different types of cults, but the Jehovah's Witnesses are specifically Arianists, because they believe that Jesus was a created being.
There's a bunch of other religions out there that are.
Oh, there sure are. So anyway, when it says brought me forth, again, on page 35 of your study guide, has caused a great deal of discussion among Bible scholars, with Solomon saying that wisdom was the first thing God created, or did he merely mean that God possessed wisdom as he created? The verb in verse 22 is used 12 times in Proverbs, and each time conveys the idea of acquiring or possessing. It is unlikely that Solomon meant to convey that wisdom was a created entity. Okay? But anyway, wisdom was there when God created the waters, the mountains, the sky, everything. And again,
Yeah, I think a better interpretation is God used his wisdom
exactly.
to do the creative process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's a new movement afoot that a lot of Darwinists do not like. It's called the intelligent design movement. Obviously, there was an intelligence behind the universe. And so Solomon would say, obviously, there was wisdom in the creation of the universe. So, anyway. By the way, if you take a look at page 36 of your study guide,
Ancient Wisdom Parallels.
there's Ancient Wisdom Parallels. Yes, would somebody read that box for us, please?
Books composed of Proverbs were common in the ancient Middle East. The use of such literature has been traced back in written form to the ancient Egyptians and
Mesopotamians.
Mesopotamians around 2700 BC. Numerous verses from the book of Proverbs are similar to the Proverbs of
Amenhotep.
Amenhotep, an Egyptian who lived during the time of Solomon. Below is an example of a similar proverb for comparison.
Right, so on the one side, it says, do not lean on scales, nor falsify the weights, nor damage the fractions of the measure. On the other side, it shows different weights and different measures. The Lord detests both of them. Yeah.
Despite their similarity, there is one glaring difference.
Amenhotep, I can't even pronounce his name.
A minimum.
There you go, Amenhotep.
Amenhotep made no reference to God, to the wise men of Israel. True wisdom came only from God. Appropriating wisdom was impossible apart from a healthy fear of God. This is what separated Jewish wisdom literature from all its ancient counterparts.
Very good, thank you, Karen. It reminds me, I was watching a video that was produced this week by Eric Stickleback, and he was talking about all the negative things in the news. He said, I want to give you something positive. And he played a video. He was in Jerusalem, and he went to the tunnels along the Western Wall, and there's a new excavation going on, and he and his film crew got a special privilege to interview this archaeologist, and the things that they're going to put on display eventually haven't even been displayed yet. And anyway, so they're talking about this layer right outside the Temple Mount, and as they go further and further, they find more and more artifacts. And the artifacts they had found this last week were these little weights, and these were called 2 shekel weights. And what he explained to Eric Stickleback was that many people didn't have money during those days. We're going all the way back to the Solomon's Temple era at this level. And so people would come to Jerusalem, and when they would want to buy things, they might have some silver with them. And so they would have a scale, and they would take these little 2 shekel weights and put them on one side of the scale, put some silver on the other side, and because let's say somebody was going to sell their olive oil at a certain rate. And so that's how they did business. And so these weights, and he handed him, and Eric Stickleback is literally holding on to things that are like 2,700 years old, from Solomon's time and from Solomon's temple. It's very, very fascinating. But again, the crux of Solomon's day could have different weights, and so if they wanted to cheat people, they'd say, oh yeah, it's 2 shekels, and then they reach into their gown and they pull out a different weight that is different.
Yeah, 2.5 shekel weight.
To benefit them, And so that's the idea of these verses here. So, but yeah, it's just fascinating. Just this week, and this broadcast, you can see it online, and he does an hour-long broadcast, and then he does some of these shorter broadcasts. And he's just been over in Israel, and one of his favorite things to talk about is archaeology. And so he's interviewed all these different archaeologists. So. All right, let's take a look at hearing wisdom's call in verses 32 through 36.
Now therefore, sons, listen to me, for blessed are they who keep my ways, and the instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at my doorpost. For he who finds me finds life, and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who sins against me injures himself. All those who hate me love death.
Okay, very good.
That's
So,
true.
It is true.
It goes back to that verse you opened us with.
Yeah,
They love death.
yeah, it is.
All those who hate me love death. That's
Yeah.
pretty bad.
That's, the idea is that there is a way which seems right unto
To
man,
man.
I
but
hate
the end
death.
thereof is the way of death.
I don't like death
And
at
so
all.
Jesus even talked about the fact that there's 2 ways. There's the narrow way and the broad way. The narrow way leads to life, the broad way leads to death. And eventually, again, when you talk about the gospel, okay, take a look at John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son,
begotten Son,
that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have what?
Everlasting
Everlasting life. So eternal life is a benefit of knowing God, of knowing Christ. Okay, and so basically there are 2 paths. One path of life leads to life, the other to death. Now, what
I
Dan
was
is
saying-
referring to, again, is I don't think it's inappropriate at all for us as believers in church to talk about what just took place in the Supreme Court. Because if you study the Bible, and if you truly believe what the Bible teaches, that leads you to being pro-life.
You can't go.
Right, that God created us, we're responsible to Him, and so the interesting thing is that the other side has manipulated the English language and come up with phrases that sound very, very innocuous, like choice, pro-choice, I'm for choice. Well, the other side is at least saying I am pro-life. Because again, you need to realize that abortion always leads to death, if it's a successful abortion. I realize there are some children who
There are few that
live through
survive.
botched abortions. But if the abortion is successful, it always leads to death. And it's interesting that that side does not say I am pro-death. I am in favor of killing children. They're saying, no, I am in favor of choice. A woman should have a choice. What just took place in the Supreme Court, and I hope everybody realizes this, the Supreme Court's decision did not make abortion illegal in this country by any way, shape, or form.
I don't believe in abortion.
I wish it did, but it didn't.
Right. What it did was, Roe versus Wade said there was a federal constitutional right to abortion in this country. And what they did was they revisited that and they're saying, no, that's wrong. There is nowhere in the Constitution where the federal government says that everybody has a right to an abortion. So what it does, it throws it back to the states and allows the states to make their own choices. Here's what I'm concerned about. There are some states who obviously want to move to make abortion illegal. There are other states that want to make it very restrictive. Yesterday, the governor of the state of Washington had a press conference, and he is so concerned that over time there could be a change in our state legislature or our governorship, where the legislature could pass some sort of laws that would either restrict or make abortion illegal in our state. He is pushing for a state constitutional amendment that makes abortion an inviolable right in Washington state, which means that a legislature couldn't just pass a rule or a
Couldn't
law.
change it, yeah.
Right. So again, it's very hard to amend a state constitution, just like it's hard to amend a federal constitution. Right now, there is nothing in the Constitution of the state of Washington that guarantees.
Doesn't mention it at all,
No,
does
it doesn't, and not in the federal constitution. So anyway, but we as believers should be concerned because again, this whole pro-life issue should be very, very important to us because we don't believe it's just a political issue. We believe it's a moral issue. It's a spiritual issue. And again, what Dan pointed out here, that all those who hate me love death.
They're obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
there's,
love. Well, I'm sorry, Trina, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's so many people that bemoan terrible things like cancer and other diseases and other, and why can't we find a cure? Well, maybe the person that was going to find that cure was one of those that was aborted.
Yeah. I love what Ronald Reagan said many, many years ago as he looked at this person. He said, "It appears to me that you were birthed." Somebody was, raving back there in the 80s about that, and Reagan just said, "It appears to me you've been birthed."
Right.
I love that.
That's funny.
Well, I also saw a bumper sticker one time, something to the effect of, "Aren't you glad that your mother made the choice she made?" So, but anyway, but yeah, we have this definite contrast here, and what is interesting here is that wisdom, again, because wisdom is personified, she is portrayed as talking to young people and giving them the opportunity to change before it's too late. And it's interesting, if you take a look on page 37 of your study guide, in the upper right-hand column, it says, "As in wisdom's earlier invitation, she used the term listen. This word carried with it the idea of hearing with a desire to obey and readiness to act. Her invitation to the young man to meet her at her home is a stark contrast with the invitation of the adulteress. Unlike the adulteress who seeks him in darkness, wisdom searches for him in the light of day." So before you get into this contrast between the adulteress and wisdom, again, the idea of listen is not just hearing sounds, but actually taking what you're hearing and putting that into action. Yes, Karen?
It's just like the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife.
Okay,
Same thing,
right.
commit adultery.
Right, and so you have the idea here of doing something about it. And so you've heard the old expression of it falling on deaf ears.
Yeah.
In other words, you've talked to somebody and they've heard you, but it's just either gone right over their head or they could care less or whatever. They don't do anything about it. Okay, and so the word that is used here is listening with the intent of doing something about it. And so then the contrast here is between the adulteress, and wisdom. So again, two females. And the consequences the young man would receive for his visit. The adulterous woman would curse the young man with death. Wisdom would bless the young man with favors from the Lord and a full and abundant life. So again, not only is wisdom personified through Proverbs, but this adulteress keeps popping up. And of course, last week we saw that there was a difference between an adulteress and a prostitute. And in Solomon's way of thinking, the adulteress is actually worse or more dangerous than the prostitute. Because the adulteress has a husband, and he's liable to come after you, is the idea that was given there. So, wisdom closes passage with a warning about ignoring her. Those who choose not to follow her were in reality just hurting themselves. And again, on page 38 of your study guide, the words that I mentioned just a few minutes ago, in Matthew 7, 13 and 14, Jesus said, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and few will find it." When Trudy and I were in college at Simpson, it used to be in San Francisco, and there was a group called the Jews for Jesus, and they put out tracts called broadsides, and they were very interesting tracts. I mean, if you were handed one, you couldn't help but at least want to read it. And so some of the students would go down with them to different locations, and one favorite location was this major boulevard in downtown San Francisco where all the porno joints were. So all these X-rated theaters, all this other stuff that was going on. And very, very significantly, the name of that street was Broadway. Broadway. That was Broadway. So there's the narrow way and the Broadway. And that literally was the Broadway. And so, yeah, people would go down and witness down there. All right, let's take a look at page 38 quickly before we close. Proverbs 9 in brief. Would somebody read that in brief section for us?
Solomon presented two lifestyles for people to choose. One was the way of wisdom or righteousness. The other was the path of folly or wickedness. The king contrasted these two opposing lifestyles by personifying them both as women. Solomon described wisdom as being talented and industrious. She built her own spacious house and prepared great meals on her own. In contrast, Solomon pictured folly without any positive talents or motivation to grow. Folly could not build her own home or take care of herself. While wisdom was busy working, folly was idly sitting by. The only similarities between the two women were their locations and desired audience. Both called out from the highest point of the city, which symbolized that both lifestyles were available to anyone at any time. Both women also targeted the simple, immature, and naive. People with these characteristics were not limited to any specific age or gender. Wisdom and folly made themselves available to anyone.
So again, you have personification going on here. So obviously wisdom is not a person, it is not a she, but again, this just shows how wisdom is out there and presenting itself. And of course, we said early on in our study of Proverbs that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That's where it all starts. And I think that's a huge problem in our society today. We're talking about atheism. Many of our colleges and universities, especially, let alone some of our secondary schools, teach atheistic materialism. And if you are inculcated in atheistic materialism and you think that's all that there is, then it's going to lead you down certain paths of life. And seriously, when you see what's gone on in our nation this weekend, in Portland last night, they were rioting, they were destroying public businesses, cars on the streets. They were vandalizing, they were putting graffiti up. These people have nothing to do with the Supreme Court, but it's just this built-in anger, and it's expressing itself.
And Oregon has just as many abortion rights as the state of Washington, so they really have nothing to be.
Yeah, Oregon, they have nothing because in
Oregon, you can have an abortion at any moment, right up to the moment that the passage is cleared.
So why then are people out destroying people's lives and businesses when nothing has changed in Oregon or Washington?
That I don't know.
Well, I heard on TV yesterday sometime that when they said, oh goody, they were all excited, they can go riot, that's fun. And I don't even think they care about why they're rioting.
No, they're just filled with hate and anger, and they
Yeah.
don't,
Right,
just looking for an
Well,
excuse
they
to
think
express.
it's fun.
right. All right, we're out of time. We need to get ready for our closing time.